Hi, I'm Nina Bawal from Cyberlight Books. Thank you for joining our webinar series. This is a four-part series that will support you going through internet independence, a product that we've created at Cyberlight Books to ensure that our children can become independent online, having the critical thinking and solutions to keep themselves safe. Today, we're going to deep dive into two of the key topics that we've identified within the Internet Independent Programme, managing online relationships and cyberbullying. The programme was devised to put children in a setting that they're in the real world. We have educated thousands of children globally. And in doing so, what we noticed was often children could tell you about cyber safety in the definitions and exploration of a classroom. But when you put them into the real world setting and the nuances involved in identifying cyber risk, they found it more complicated. We weren't training them what to look for in the real world. And so we developed the Internet Independent Learning Library, where we created exercises in a box. This is very similar to cybersecurity and how we teach risk in the cyber world. We want people to have the skills to identify when risk is coming and a playbook that they can pull out with solutions, techniques to keep them safe when this is happening. Therefore, we have put experimental learning into our platform. How we've done that is by devising and homing down on 6 key topics we believe all children should be aware of. These 6 key topics are taught differently from the age of 7 to 17, but the thought process being that at the end we can let go of the hands of our children, knowing that they can critically think through strategy when they're online, when the harm comes at us from this area. As I was saying, today we're going to deep dive into online relationships, first of all. Online relationships can be thought of in 2 ways, under the age of 13 and over the age of 13, give or take depending on the child. Why we define this under and over 13 is how we interact with technology is very different with these 2 ages. Over the age of 13, children have more access and are onboarding on apps where there is a lot more social interaction. Under the age of 13, when we're talking about online relationships, a lot of the guardrails we can put into place are there through parent controls, through rules, and through pledges. Children under the age of 13 are at the age of compliance. They tend to listen to us when we're trying to impart our wisdom on them. While at the age of over 13, we're more risky with our behavior. Teenagers will try and navigate ways around what we're saying and often can get themselves into situations that they then don't want to report to an adult because they know they've probably crossed the line or are somewhere where they shouldn't be. So then we need to come away from parent controls. We need to give more strategy and tools to think through what can we do if we're in this situation. When we start the conversation with children about online relationships, we need to first of all discover where are they having these relationships and the motivations behind them. Children tend to reach out first of all online in social media channels. The pandemic allowed children to have conversations with aunts, grandparents, friends online, and they have now have that as part of their everyday system. Being able to speak to people online is as normal as speaking to people offline. And this is where the relationship first starts. Growth in a relationship online where they're not just speaking to first tier people they know in the real world, often happens on gaming platforms where the motivation is to game with somebody who is very good. They may have identified on YouTube or Twitch or Discord as somebody they'd like to play with, and they want to home in the skill of their game. Here, we need our children to question the motivations behind the people they're playing with. I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. The other area we see over 13s getting into is creating and cultivating relationships online that meet their emotional needs, be it friends, be it finding a group that understands them, or an online relationship. When we're talking about these groups, first of all, we have to establish why children want to speak to people in these groups and what they need to know if there are red flag types of behavior. On each of these apps, there are people who are positively motivated, for example, on a gaming app, to game. They just want to game with each other. They don't want to get into a big, long conversation. They have no want to create fanatical thought in somebody or build a relationship that can come offline. They're positively motivated. But there are also people on gaming apps who could be negatively motivated. So we need children to think through where the conversations are going. We can't just say, don't talk to strangers at some point. We know our children are. Anecdotally, when I walk into a classroom, I would say up to 80% of a classroom over 12 and above are speaking to strangers online. So we need to give them these skills to think through. First of all, is something being offered that's too big to be true? Is there a click or a URL that you've been asked to forward on that you are going to look at that has nothing to do with the motivation of why you first started in the game or the social media account? Is there something that's been pushed on you that could be too good to be true? Can you identify that in your real world? Can you identify somebody who has a different motivation to the meaning of the app or why you're on the app? Are they asking you lots of personal questions? Are they asking you questions that are unrelated to why you are there? And can you identify a question that could be leading you somewhere else? One of the big ones that we get very wary of is when somebody suggests you move on to a different platform or a different app. Many of the platforms our children are on do have technology and safety controls in place. They will make sure that the children are in a safe location or won't be exposed to adult behavior, etc., depending on the app. Somebody who's suggesting for you to come off that app onto WhatsApp or Telegram are taking you out of that safe behavior or that safe space, as it were. So we need our children to understand what could be the motivation behind somebody wanting you to go somewhere else with them online. Love bombing. We find that a lot of children who are getting older, who are establishing their own emotions and their own feelings away from their parents, their value systems are changing, will be excited or develop relationships where they feel overjoyed, love is giving everything they want. They need to think through a motivation of why would somebody be agreeing with me all the time? Why would somebody be reaching out to me all the time when I've not met them in the real world? They have to think through the questions of the online relationships they're forming. One of the things that we really want to define and develop is children understanding the concept of consent when they're online. When we see children navigating online relationships, they may be asked to, again, click on links, share photos or videos. We need younger children to establish, first of all, that their online footprint can be controlled by them. So simple things. Can they obtain consent from their parents before their parents post another picture of their birthday party or Christmas online? Can they obtain consent from the school? And the school can ask them, would you like our picture to go up there? Are you okay with that? That really puts boundaries around them very young to understand they get to control what's online about them and what they want to put out there. It's very important we establish control young. Therefore, as they get older, we can start establishing and building on that conversation and asking if somebody asks you for a photo of yourself and you feel that somewhere instinctively they're asking for something that makes you very uncomfortable, you have the right to consent to whether you send that photo. You should not feel the power imbalance and have some control over that. Same with videos as well. Another way to have this conversation in a classroom is consensual posting of photos of each other. If friends are making memes and gifts and you're involved in it, can they establish whether you want to be part of it or not? And do you have the voice and the vocabulary to say, actually, I'm not too comfortable with this? This leads on to older children as well. And I'd say, the growth of sharing inappropriate content is very high. It's establish that children will see inappropriate content a lot younger than we expect them to. And we have to get them to understand what to do in a situation when they see it, and be able to use their vocabulary and their words if they're feeling really, really pressured into opening something or sending something. Younger children may see pornographic images way before they should, and they are often very worried and exhausted by the fact that they've seen it, and they need to have a conversation because they're not too sure what they've seen. The older children will start to get exposed to inappropriate content or be asked to send inappropriate content. And again, we need to go back to that conversation of consent and boundaries online, and really get them to think of their value system and what's out there, and for them to understand how a photo or a video can escalate and come out of the control of one individual into the hands of many, and the repercussions that could have. I'm stepping away from the conversation of online relationships and stepping into the conversation of cyberbullying and abuse online. The growth of cyberbullying that we see in schools across the globe has escalated after the pandemic. We used to see a lot of peer-on-peer cyberbullying, where it would be in a classroom setting. They may know each other in the real world, and it was an escalation of the drama that may have occurred in the classroom or in the playground. And now, because children are more used to reaching out to people they don't know in the real world, we see cyberbullying coming from channels or for people that they don't know. So it's harder for adults to establish boundaries or reconciliation when they don't know who that party is. One of the first things we've worked with children to understand is, first of all, the definitions around cyberbullying. As part of the program, we really go into all the key types of cyberbullying there are. We found that if we equip our children with the language to identify the behavior, they don't get as confused about what they can do now and the next steps. For example, sometimes children will say, well, that wasn't really cyberbullying. You know, we were just having a conversation. It just got a bit out of hand. And that can be true. And then you have to establish what the definition of that behavior is and how to deal with that. So, for example, we will define exclusion. Exclusion is a type of cyberbullying when you exclude someone from a group or a conversation. So maybe somebody has come out of a WhatsApp group because they felt like they were being pressured or they didn't like the atmosphere of it. That is consensual. But somebody who's been kicked out of a WhatsApp group for not having the right opinions or the value system, that is cyberbullying, and that can be very hurtful to somebody. Even establishing the word upstander. Many children are taught upstander behavior, and I'll go into that in a minute. But if they don't have the clear definition of what an upstander's role is and how to implement that role, often children don't know how to get involved or what their role is in a situation of cyberbullying. One of the first three key things we do when we talk about cyberbullying is give children the ability to identify what the difference is between cyberbullying, digital drama, and hate speech, so they can classify the types of behavior that they see online. Digital drama, as I was saying, may be something that they see day to day, would be a relationship that they would be navigating in the real world as well, where there is conflict, the conflict's around one particular situation, and that they can play out the conflict to a resolution in the end. That is what we call digital drama. Cyberbullying is when that victim is continuously targeted by a perpetrator for everything they do online. It might not just be about one situation, it might grow outwards, and then more people will pile on with their opinions and their thoughts to back up or to have an opinion on that, and that grows into a cyberbullying case. Hate speech is when a community or a group or one thing about your minority may be targeted heavily, and people are piling on, and mayhem havoc is being provoked, and it's been provoked on purpose to cause harm. Often it's good to use resources like the ones we have, or ones you can pick up as well, to show what this looks like in the real world and identify those three as incredibly different. It's also good to talk to the children about where they see this behavior and what that behavior looks like. For example, Discord is a channel that's been adapted by our gamers. It allows them to game and also have a conversation at the same time with their friends, and it's highly social, interactive. Children will go into server rooms with people that they know. So a server room that is established with your class or is established with their friends at home is a safe space where they can navigate their online world. The problems start to occur when they go into other server rooms where people may have different motivations, different language, be sending each other inappropriate content, and there's an overexposure to negative behaviors. Cyberbullying often happens in this context, especially if you're gaming, you lose a game, you're forfeiting a game for someone else. It can become a massive escalation. Have a conversation with your children about the platforms they use and where they've seen bullying or negative behaviors and how they define those behaviors. And always work towards having a conversation about how they can be an upstander in this situation. Being an upstander often feels like a throwaway word where we say, hi guys, you don't have to be negative. You can also be somebody who supports. It really comes into its own when you break down what upstander behavior looks like and how it can be a good motivation for someone to have in that scenario or app when they can see negative behavior. One of the things to do with children is get them to understand what an upstander looks like for them and what they would want to do in a scenario and how they would insert themselves into it to be an upstander. The other thing we need to establish with our children is what to do when they see something and they've been an upstander. Does your school have an anonymous email address? One of the biggest things we hear is, well, I wanted to help, but I didn't want to be seen as a snitch, or I didn't want people to think that I was meddling and become part of the drama or part of the bullying experience. So I stepped away. So if we give children a protocol or a policy to say, we understand where you are and why you want to distance yourself from the situation. However, here is a protocol, here's a policy that's going to help you out. And if you do step forward, the upstander behavior is recognized and supported to your community. With cyberbullying growing so much, we need a community spirit and our children to understand community matters online and not feel that they need to step away all the time, and then give them the skills and the tool sets to be able to step forward and report and know that something positive will come out of it in the end. The last online relationship conversation I want to have, and we will roll this into more topics as we go through the webinar experience series, is grooming. Grooming online has become more prevalent, and we need to give children the language and the skills to understand if they are in a situation where they could be incredibly vulnerable. The reason I wanted to bring this slide in now is so we understand when we move through the webinar series to take this back to motivations when people are on the app and why people are on the app and the online relationships they are there to form, and how they can now establish the difference between an online relationship they want to form and one that could be highly negative to them. With our children, when we're talking about grooming, they need to understand there are people online with negative motivations and there are people online with positive motivations. And to spot those red flags or language where people are asking way too much or trying to get very close emotionally to you. Can you establish that? And do you have the skills to get yourself out of the situation? Lastly, as we tie this session off, one of the big skills we need to give all our children is the consent to report and block. Often when there's negativity happening online, there is a power imbalance as there is in the real world. And children sometimes think they have to stay in that situation or don't know how to get out of it. Getting a child to understand that this is their online space and they can decide who's allowed in it and who's not allowed in it, what behaviors are okay and what behaviors are not okay. And they have every right to use that block button. Put them in scenarios where you feel that they can think through, would I block this or would I not block this? Would I have a conversation? Would I be an upstander? Would I reach out? Would I take a screenshot and show an adult? These are some of the core conversations you can have around this topic. Thank you for listening to us today, and we look forward to you tuning in to our next webinar, part 2, where we will look more at privacy and security and identifying the types of spaces our children are in.